So I was born in 1984. 1984, not 1948. Two different digits, but that's when I was born. And I was born in Jerusalem, here. And I grew up in Bethlehem my whole life. Grew up in a family that was culturally Christian, let's say somehow. Family that was working in the tourism industry most of its time. And that basically influenced my life in a way, because when you grow up in a family that works in the tourism industry between 1984 and 1995, you get to encounter a lot of Israelis, because then there were no Palestinian tour guides or Israeli or Palestinian bus drivers. Most of the Jewish people that I met, Israeli Jewish people that I met in that industry, were Mizrahi Jews. So what does that mean? I encountered people who spoke my language, shared the same culture that I have, made coffee in the same way that my family made in the business coffee shop, in the business kitchen. Did heat their food that they brought with them in the kitchen also, which looked the same as my mom's food, and spoke and laughed with my family in Arabic. So that gave me blissfully and unblissfully an experience of having a phase in my life where I didn't see a lens of an other in this land. Because you identify with people who share the same language, same culture with you. That was nice and amazing. Little bit after that, the bubble bursts and you get to encounter occupation. As much as they tell you that people here force feed, and when I say people here, I mean all communities in this land, that they force feed the understanding of the other to their kids, they do, and there's a lot of incitement, but at some point, you have to encounter it yourself to understand what's happening. And I encountered occupation between 1987 and 1995. My house was located next to Bethlehem University, which meant at that time, before Oslo, if you are a Palestinian and you're trying to hold a Palestinian flag, you can get arrested. Or you sing a Palestinian anthem, you get arrested. So, youth, university, youth, they go out, draw on the walls the flag, write the Palestinian anthem. Minutes later, half an hour later, you have an Israeli jeep starting in front of my house, shooting tear gas canisters and rubber bullets toward those people who are in the university. And at that point, it was that point where I realized actually that there is something wrong in the picture, because those people in the uniform were speaking a different language that I didn't understand yet at that part of my life. And also because you look and you see people in uniform, and you, understanding American TV, you expect that those are the good people. And on the other hand, I see those students who pass every morning and they say good morning to that little cute that I was then. I'm not cute anymore right now. But that's the reality. And so you encounter occupation. You know, it was nice. Luckily, and unluckily also, again, also happened. And we all got on the high. You know, peace is happening. There is a peace agreement that's been signed as we were told. We are shown the whole memoration of signing the agreement in the back of the White House, and we got from the high as people who lived in the land that pieces can happen. Going from space where there is that continuous violence in between those communities, that there is going to be peace. And people in Bethlehem and other areas also went out when the Israeli soldiers redeployed out of the locations of Bethlehem and other areas, and were throwing rice and branches of olive, which is a sign of celebration and peace in Eastern culture, just like in weddings also. So yeah, it was nice. I enjoyed the peace camp and it was amazing. We were brought to see each other, encounter each other. Now for me, that experience I had it before the peace camp, because I met Israelis many during the business, through the business of my family. And I actually started learning Hebrew between the year 1992 and after from TV, Sesame Street. That's how I learned Hebrew. And from the news, listening to the news. And so I wanted to go a step forward, not just meeting the Israeli, because I've met before. I wanted actually to show others what I was seeing, that actually there is a possibility that those can live together, those people, that there is space for peace. And we got high on the peace camp, and unfortunately it was a very shallow peace camp that didn't go deep into does it mean, peace? What does it look like, peace? What is the price that we are willing to have that peace? And everyone was thinking that they are victorious in those negotiations and that they are going to go out as winners, and nobody understood even the price tag again of peace. In the year 2000, we saw a decline, and we started seeing that this is fading and also is not going to work out. And we saw the burst of the second intifada with the militarization of the second intifada, and things went south, basically.
Can I just ask, the peace, when you're talking about peace camp, are
I
you talking about a personal experience? that
I
you
refer
had?
to the whole movement of the peace camp.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
That's what we call it. Here they
Yeah.
call it peaceniks,
Yeah.
called peace camp, many things. And when the second intifada started, I was grown up to go to university by then. So I had to choose, and I chose to study law in the Arab American University in Jenin, north of the West Bank. And I chose badly because the timing was the worst. It was between the year 2002 and 2007, which was the time when the second intifada was in the peak, and the time where in Jenin you had the guerrilla warfare style, where you would see dead bodies on the ground. That was the experience in Jenin. It was the hardcore area of the whole operations that were happening. And it wasn't an easy experience, but it made me actually take a step back from the peace camp, because I wasn't able to say the word peace there, because there was a lot of pain among people. You say the word peace, it's just like, you get labeled immediately normalizer, you get immediately labeled as a traitor, just like being called a leftist in the Israeli community, McCarthyist in the US. So that happened, and I took a step backward, and I said, no, just let the politicians deal with it. I don't have to deal with it. They can do so. Yeah, I blamed others, and I throw it on others, and I went away. And there was an incident out of many that happened in my life in Jenin there that actually shook my face and brought me back to the peace camp, where I had to face a decision on a checkpoint whether to respond to verbal violence or not. And that experience, knowing that me personally, I do speak Hebrew, and I tend to calm things down when I speak Hebrew. When you say Boker Tov to a soldier who's 16 years old in a checkpoint, you diffuse their anger, even their fear, even, because they're youth. Let's face it, they're 16 years old, and they're standing there sometimes in the middle of nowhere, not knowing what they're doing. So you just say good morning in their language, that bridges. And I was luckily in that point to refuse verbal violence that was asked for me to be done by the soldier, and I said no, and I refused. No guarantee that I was going to go alive from that experience or not, but that was my choice. And immediately I realized that if it was my brother in my shoes, things could have ended up differently. He didn't know Israelis other than settlers or soldiers in his life. He doesn't speak Hebrew. He's a person with no anger management whatsoever in his life. As much as I try my best, he's...
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What do you mean by verbal violence?
Verbal violence. So literally the incident was that I was stopped in a checkpoint, and the soldier put the M16 in my head and pushed me out of the car, and then he said, say that I'm a son of a bitch. And excuse my language, those were his words. And I had the choice to say it back because he was asking me, but I did realize at that point that as I've personally witnessed in my life and living in this land, that even verbal violence can open a space for a reaction, whether it's verbal or violence. So somehow you're triggering somebody's violence towards you, if I was to do it. And I refused. And I knew that refusing even his request of me saying that he's a son of a bitch didn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be alive, because that's disobeying an order somehow. So I chose that, and I resisted, and he sent me back to the car, and after that it was clear that you cannot just blame the politicians, so I joined back the peace movement, and I joined in One Voice movement. I would assume that some of you are familiar with One Voice. And One Voice was a nice, amazing experience, because it actually brought back to us as a civil society belief that power of masses can change things, because they are a good organization, movement that are able to bring utilization of lobbying and advocacy within our communities on both sides. Now, are they successful? I don't think so.
I think some people don't know what One Voice is,
So,
so I just think it would be good to say.
One Voice is a grassroots movement, international grassroots movement and local one, that has Palestinians and Israelis working parallelly, separately in their communities to raise awareness and lobby and advocate for the two-state solution, which was again amazing to bring that feeling of working with masses.
I have another clarifying question for you. I don't know that everyone in this word understood, or everyone in this room understood the word normalization.
Normalization. Yeah. So to explain more normalization again, it's a term that's given to you if you are a person who works with Israelis. This emerged basically after the second intifada started, after the Oslo started falling down. And it was on the basis that if you are collaborating with the other without the other recognizing your needs, you're a collaborator. And you're a traitor and you're a normalizer of the status quo. And so it was given to people who engaged in dialogue programs. It was labeled for people who said yes to non-violence even, people who said yes to any kind of work that goes outside of the military work, basically. And there are many definitions of it. Luckily, we Palestinians do not agree on one definition for it. I'm very thankful for this because it always gives us the space to challenge what people think and assume. So there was an amazing experience that showed me that people and the power of people is capable of changing things on the ground. We were always saying it's politicians, but we were never taking our responsibility. And we did campaigns a lot and we lobbied a lot. And at some point, I noticed this organization in Bethlehem called Holy Land Trust when I was working with One Voice. And they did a non-violent demonstration where they were trying to go to Jerusalem to pray on a Palm Sunday, where even the donkeys got arrested and fined. So they attracted my attention with their unusual non-violence resistance, unorthodox or unnormal, let's say. So it was like interesting, let's see what they do more. And at some point when I was in the One Voice movement, I got an invitation from them to participate in a leadership development program that the title read, Nonlinear Leadership Thinking. So I Googled nonlinear, and the only thing I could understand from it is that it's not the normal. I said, okay, that's what I need, not the normal. So I went to, and it was an amazing experience, to be honest. And that was the first time I encountered Holy Land Trust, working with them. And it was a training that brought civil society leaders, youth and mature people, whatever we want to call them. And it brought us to a conversation of how we can actually create consciousness in the mindset of the 21st century. So it's not actually something new, this training that they do. It's consciousness that has been in religions and spiritualities for the last thousands and thousands of years. But how can we bring it to people of the 21st century? And it basically focuses on 3 domains that people need to distinguish in their life: past, present, future. And that was amazing for me in a leadership approach, but it was amazing for me on a conflict resolution approach also. Because for me, I always saw that the Palestinians and Israelis are not being able to take a step forward due to the past domain. And, because that's the reality. If you ask Palestinians and Israelis, is peace possible within its essence as peace? They say yes. But if you tweak the question, is peace possible with the Israeli? You'll hear the Palestinians saying, no, it's impossible. We trusted them. They continued taking more land. They continued uprooting more trees, killing more, blah, blah, blah. And you have the Israeli, when you tweak the question, are you willing, is peace possible with the Palestinian? They say no, because we trusted them since 1995 and they committed suicide attacks and they continue to attack us. So basically what's happening on a civil society and a political level is that we used to come to tables of negotiation with baggage of the past and allowing it to dictate how we move for that common future that we agree it's possible, which is peace. It's a vision of future. So basically this tool got me on another high. That's it. This is all what we need. You train another 2,000 people in the peace movement, and you get this happening, the 2-state solution. And we did, and we even created simulations of negotiations where the Palestinian had to study the Dori Gold narrative, not the Israeli narrative, I would say, the Dori Gold narrative even. And I was teaching it because I was obsessed with him. And I wanted to be the Palestinian Dori Gold. And the Israelis had to study the Palestinian narrative of negotiation. And they did simulations of negotiations. And you remember when Netanyahu said, till white smoke comes out from the room? It happened. We had solutions. We had things that we never spoke of. We had ideas, images in our head that nobody in the past used, even inside the movement, to have as conversation. And it was amazing. But at night, when we sit down for beer, you'll have the Israeli saying always, Kodem kol bitachon, first and foremost security. And you'll hear the Palestinian going to his same narrative of, I cannot let go of this due to national aspirations. And that was the moment of my life. I said, enough is enough. They don't want to share the ball. They don't want to learn how to play together. I'm out of the peace camp. And I took a year off, and I was always back and forward chatting with Sami Awad, the founder of Holland Trust. And at some point, he told me, yeah, it's clearly why we're not moving forward and the peace movement is not moving forward, because we undermined this history. We undermined this domain in the past. We said it's a domain of past and that's it. We didn't tackle it. We didn't deal with what happens in that past. What's yet alive is in us from that past. And he said to me, welcome to the reality, we have traumas. And at that point, I was like, enough is enough. He's hippie. He was talking about compassionate communication, then transformation and consciousness, and now he's talking about traumas and healing. It's hippie. And at some point, he was telling me and challenging me as a Christian. He was like, if you're a Christian, what does it mean that Jesus says love your enemy? And I was like thinking, does he want me to go to a checkpoint and hang a soldier? Because I'm not going to do that for sure. But what does it mean? Even if I'm not Christian, if I'm culturally Christian, if I'm not that religiously Christian, where does that even teaching fall within the culture of Christianity as a culturally Christian person? And I started asking those questions to myself, and I came back to Sam and I said, I'm ready to join. And he said, okay. And I joined the organization and joined for the last 2 years, where our work has been shifting to refocus and introduce a third intervention in our work. So we had nonviolence, compassionate communication, nonlinear thinking as a tool for consciousness. And in the last 3 years, the organization had brought in trying to bring in the intervention of healing. And what I say by healing here is the reality that welcome to the Holy Land. We are communities, whether you want to refer to them Jewish, Christian or Muslim, Palestinians or Israelis, but we are communities that have huge baggage from the past. Jewish community with thousands of years of anti-Semitism throughout Europe, Christian-led, something that we have to admit of, crowned by Nazi German era, whatever happened after 1948 in this land. And on the other side, you have what we recognize as Palestinian community, who are Christians, Muslims, even Jews who lived pre the state of Israel here, who suffered 600 years of Ottoman Empire occupation in this land before the state of Israel. So in reality, there is a lot of fear and pain in people that hasn't been dealt with over the whole time that we are bringing right now to our day-to-day conflict. And my experience with Holland Trust started with visiting Auschwitz and Birkenau for a retreat with Bearing Witness. It's a Zen Peacemaker retreat carried by Bernie Glassman. I don't know if you're familiar with him. And later I joined a group that we now partner with in Holland Trust called FAB, Friends Across Borders. It sounds so cheesy, but it's not cheesy at all. It's not friends and cheesy. It's actually very hardcore kind of work where we are looking at the trilogy of German, Jewish, and Palestinians, and trying to understand the trilateral relation between the German, Jewish, and Palestinian relation, how it affects policy making. What do I mean by this? You hear Palestinians annoyed by saying, oh, we need a permission to go to Israel. We hate Israel for this reason that we need a permission. This permission is not coming from a system that's found in the Bible. This system comes from people like me, like you, who sit in a building that we call parliament, and they make laws, policies. So really, policies do not only describe or respond to what's happening right now. They respond also to fears that are in us. And when you hear Israelis always saying, "Kodem kol bitachon," first and foremost security, it doesn't come out from thin air. Jewish community has suffered extensively with existential threat. Same, you hear a Palestinian, Kodem kol, they say first and foremost our national aspirations. What are those national aspirations? Palestinians before the state of Israel, when they were under the Ottoman rule, they suffered a suppression of identity. The language, to write it, the customs. There was always an attempt by the Turkish Empire to replace the local culture. You see the red hats that people wear sometimes, tarbush we call it in Arabic. This is not Arab, this is Turkish. We even replaced it in our own traditions. Unconsciously, Arabs have it right now in their own traditions. So there is a lot of traumas basically in those communities who inhabit the land, and which we are part of. And right now, this is one of the projects that we work with. And right now we have expanded to have 3 other projects that are related mainly to trauma and hate and fear. Because in reality, trauma results into that fear in us, and fear results into hate. And we work right now with religious leaders from the 3 communities, where we bring them together to space of engaging with compassionate communication and non-linear, but also after that, emerging in looking into the textbooks. What are the calls that are there to respond to the situation of fear and hate? Does it say and command you to love the other, or does it say and command you to hate the other? We know that even as much as people as abuse religion for their extreme agendas, there are calls in each religion that call for tolerance, acceptance of the other eventually. So how do we bring those religious leaders? And again, those religious leaders, the term religious leaders, it's so, it does not help us even, because it makes us forget that they are actually human beings like us who fall into fear and fall into the same trap of subconsciously preaching fear of the other. So now they look into those texts that they have and they start trying to come out with joint approach of how do we, from a spiritual and a religious perspective, address the situation. Where are the calls to living among others? Where are the calls to preserve the others? What are your commands in Christianity, in Judaism, in Islam? So that's the kind of work we do with the religious leaders. The similar work that we do also with international and local communities. So we work with Israelis not directly because we're not allowed. We work with partners who are on the Israeli side. Some of them you might know, like Jerusalem Center for Jewish-Christian Relations, also Hebrew Uni College, and many others, and Sapir College also in Sderot. And we try through our partners to start to apply the same approach where we engage civil society and political leaders also in this approach, how to really come to understand what is that peace that they want to live in. It might sound so nice to you. We're not trying to look the nice. So what it means, we are not the regular organization or the regular community that's trying to work with people who are the nice and the good Israeli and the nice and the good Palestinians. No, we work with Hamas, we work with settlers from Kiryat Arba, people who say we cannot accept Palestinian presence at all, we have to kill all Palestinians. So we basically bring all the extremes on the table, we bring them to the table, we expose them to their local community and to the international community. Because our work also relies on international community changing their attitude toward this conflict, where people are only engaged in being pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli rather than being pro and into the conflict. So we work with both, and at many points we find ourselves sometimes having to bridge between Palestinians and Palestinians who agree with Hamas or others or not, and with Israelis and Israelis, where who they are willing to sit with settlers or not. Because an unfortunate reality is that in the last 20 years, we have been taught in the peace camp on both sides that settlers are demons, and they are the reason that peace is not happening in this land, where in reality it's not. And that the refugees are demons, and that's why Palestinians are not agreeing to peace. And in reality, that's not. So, yeah, I'll leave it for questions.
So I'm hoping that, so Antwan's just told us a little bit about this project that he works on in Holy Land Trust that involves bringing lots of different groups of people to the table, religious leaders, people from the international community, and also just people on the ground. How do we get settlers, refugees? How do we get people to come to the table and have conversations? And I'm hoping that as a group we can really engage with Antwan and have a conversation about where the project is now, where Holy Land Trust and Antwan hope that it will go in the future, and what are the challenges in terms of realizing the aims of the project in terms of getting it to where it needs to go in the future. But before we dive into that conversation, I'm going to use my moderator privilege, and I want to ask you the first question, which is going to take us a little bit back. We've spent a lot of time as a group today. You know, we started in Yad Vashem, and then we did a workshop with an Israeli social worker, focusing on experiences of Israeli trauma. And you talked a little bit about sort of like historical Palestinian experiences of trauma, but I'm curious to know more about the Palestinians that you work with who come to the table and engage in this workshop. What are some of the traumas that they bring to the table?
Palestinian trauma, it goes back to the Turkish Ottoman Empire and this refusal of allowing a community to have an identity, whether cultural, whether religious, or whether political even. So that's the major one that we have. I mean, there are a lot of other traumas that haven't been dealt with, like 1948 and afterwards, and what it means and how to get out of it. even the trauma of the two-state solution, as we are speaking about two-state solution right now. There is trauma also of a tribal mentality. Palestinian community is an Arab community, and what does that mean? They are part of a Arab culture, and the Arab culture have some remnants in it of, I mean, it's tribal hugely, but have a lot of things in it that are traumatizing for community, which we'll find in different other also communities. That's what I say Palestinian trauma is related mostly to the conflict, to the background. Yeah.
Yeah. Questions?
When you said that you work with both extremes, how do you get them to come to the table with you, and what does it mean to work with them?
Yeah, it's a good question that you asked, actually. It's very funny because I had to ask myself this question at the beginning. How are we going to approach those who do not even accept us? And it's easy. Everyone has a key, let's say. Everyone needs something from you eventually. And everyone wants something in their life. And if you're able to respond to those needs that they have in their life, you're able to bring them to the conversation. So if I am to go to Hamas and talk, or to settlers and talk to about two-state solution in the framework of what we understood peacemaking of two-state solution and full segregation, whatever, in the last 20 years, those people will not listen to you. But if you come and ask them, what do you want? What is it that really you want? What is it, that vision of peace that you think is possible for you to accept? Hamas said they don't accept, for example, a vision of peace at all. They have the continuous jihad. But if you ask the individual, what is that vision that you can accept or turn to peace? You can start getting things out of them. Even on the Israeli side, settlers who refuse the two-state solution, they don't refuse it because they hate peace, for example. They just refuse it because the two-state solution, or the framework that we have learned in the last 20 years, basically denies their existence and denies their needs. So whether it's settlers, especially religious settlers, if we are talking, because those are the ones who matter. Not that others don't matter, but financial or economical settlers that we know of are people who are willing easily to change based on economical factors. But religious settlers are the people who are actually a community that you cannot deny, because they have biblical attachment to the land. They say this is the promised land. This is Yehuda v'Shimron. This is Judea and Samaria. This is where actually it happened. It's not Tel Aviv and Haifa. No, it's not biblical. It's actually the West Bank. So and we saw how when denying them their attachment, we saw how they reacted. 1996, Rabin was assassinated. He didn't get assassinated out of thin air. No, there was a mainstream leftist unreligious community in Israel who led the peace camp then, who neglected basically a religious camp, who was saying we're here for our biblical attachment, not for you as Tel Avivans. And so they tried to scream, nobody heard them, and that's what, if you put a kid in a small room and close, they scream first time, third time, and they try to knock the door then after that. And they exploded eventually by killing Rabin. Vice versa on the Palestinian side. Hamas, what is Hamas? If we are to consider them the extreme, majority of them are of refugee camps. Why did they grow up in refugee camps even between 95 and the year 2000? Because refugees were marginalized in the peace issue. They were said to be last core component to deal with. So they screamed out. So those extremes, you need to have a conversation with them that responds to their need. If I come to an Israeli settler and I'm saying to him, I'm willing that you are living in this land with me as peer, as equal, not as supremer, not as a occupier or a settler, then I'm recognizing his right, his emotional belonging to the land as peers. And then, yeah, you can have conversations with them. And same, you have conversations with refugees. If you recognize that they have that emotional attachment to that place, Haifa or Yafa, and that actually in reality they should have the right to go there, and it should be part of a whole process, then you can engage them with conversations.
Excuse me. One question, two different takes on it. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I heard you say during your presentation that quote unquote the settlers are not the problem, and this was in relation to parliament and politicians being people as well, who are also guided by trauma and fear, subconsciously maybe. So my question is, On the one hand, what profit do you see in this dialogue between extremes and working on the margins in this way, when quote-unquote settlers are not the problem, and it's the politicians that are the problem? And similarly, can you speak about grassroots successes and failures?
Well, when I said settlers are not the problem, I didn't mean that the politicians are the problem. Because I again said, and you recognize that I said that politicians are normal human beings like us who fall in fear and trauma. And in reality, it's not leaders who are the problem. It's not just the leaders, but it's the whole movement that has happened in the last 20 years, where peace and security were given to us through one lens only, which is the two-state solution. And the reason I'm saying why settlers are not the problem, because again, if you go to making peace, what is peace about? Peace is about a day where everyone in this land is recognized for who they are, and their right of existence in this land, their right of security, and their right of decent life. If you have all those components for people here on all communities, then nobody would be in a conflict. The reason we have conflict is that not all of those are being addressed for all communities. So if we want to have peace, we need to check back again and say, what vision of peace do we have, and what needs does it respond to? A two-state solution, for example, in the framework that we've learned it, only responds to people who want a state based on national identity. It doesn't respond to people who have religious belief on the Jewish side, for example. On the Palestinian side, it does respond to people who live in West Bank and Gaza, who are originally West Bankers and Gazans, but it doesn't respond to the refugee camps, the community of the refugee camps. And so in this way, we have marginalized two major communities when we did the peace, and that's why it failed. So I'm not blaming it on the politicians, and I'm not saying that the settlers are the reason. It's the culture and the vision that we had for the peace that was the problem. When you have a vision of peace that comes and says, segregate us to have peace. Segregation does not bring peace. Segregation brings more fear of the other, because you don't know, you don't meet the other. I grew up in time before Oslo, when there was no something called permission or checkpoint or wall. Driving to Jerusalem, to Tel Aviv, Haifa, Eilat in our family's car was normal. Israelis used to do shopping in Bethlehem. All the settlers used to go through the Palestinian cities to reach their settlements, not bypass roads. So even the ones of Kiryat Arba that are viewed to be the extreme, they used to drive through Bethlehem, shop through Bethlehem before they reach to Kiryat Arba. So it's not about who to blame, it's actually what are we trying to sell them here. Are we trying to sell them something that responds to their needs? Are we responding to the majority of the community needs or not? So you cannot basically say it's settlers or politicians. I would personally blame it on the vision that we had that wasn't inclusive of everyone. In the last 13, 14 years of my life, I would say I haven't been able to see success until the last 2 years, to be honest, because we were just turning around the same, running around each other basically. And in the last 2 years, we're taking this approach where actually people get recognized in their needs and in their being and their pain. I saw extremes coming to a space of having peace or willing to work on peace. Yeah, we had one of the example I can share is refugee camp from Balata refugee camp in Nablus, who is a BDS leader in his community, who refused any sort of meeting Israelis ever in his life. And on the other side, you had an Israeli participant who's a Zionist leftist scholar. So I don't know how you want to put it down, but that's him. And both could not see each other. They wouldn't allow themselves to accept the being of each other even. The Zionist is saying, I cannot accept that person who's a refugee because he holds a narrative that says there was Nakba. 1948 was Nakba, catastrophe. How can I, as a Zionist who sees the miracle in the rebirth of the state of Israel, how can I see this person? I cannot. And vice versa. The person who was the Palestinian, who couldn't see the other participant pain, where it was coming from and where all this was coming from, he couldn't see the Israeli participant. At some point, after doing this work with them, utilizing restorative justice and a deeper understanding of who we are, it came comes to a point where you have the refugee guy asking the Israeli participant to tell him more about his grandmother's story in Auschwitz. And the Israeli is coming to a point of saying, I want to open Pandora's box. I want to understand what is this Nakba, what it did to your grandmother. So yes, I see success. Is it nationwide, nation level? No. But there is something that we haven't been able to bridge in the past that through this approach we are being able to bridge.
Thank you.
I read recently about this new initiative called like 2 states, 1 people or something like that. So do you feel like, so this is, maybe you can explain it better than I can. From my understanding, it's just like sort of a new innovative way of understanding a solution that really speaks to the needs of these individual communities and like very porous borders and land claims that are not explicitly nationally determined. So I'm curious, did you have any involvement in that? Like what do you think about that?
So this is the product of a center called Epicry, and
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah,
Cool.
and they called for a 2-state solution in one space, and they're not the first. There were Zionist Jews and Zionist Arabs who called also for that in the 1930s.
What is a Zionist Arab?
An Arab Zionist who believe in Zionism. Zionism.
But
Has-
Zionism, like Jewish state for Jewish people, or like nationalism in this land?
Many thoughts, many supported different stuff, but there were a group of Arab Zionists in the 30s who were working along with Israeli Zionists who were talking about one state, nationality, binational basically.
Binational.
So this is not new, this is old, and in reality, there is 23 other proposed solutions other than the 2-state solution. The most marketable is the 2-state solution. That's what we have been force-fed in the last 20 years of our life. The only way to make peace, segregation, and 2 states. That's it. So the reality, there's 22 other solutions on the table. And can they work? I would say it would be sin to say that they cannot work and not try, because we haven't tried anything other than the 2-state solution. And clearly it's
We
not.
haven't really tried the 2 states.
I mean, we're trying to get to there, and clearly people don't want it. Clearly people on both sides refused it. Between 1995 and the year 2000, the events that happened on the ground signify clearly that people refuse it. Whether it's suicide attacks, the growth of the settlers movement. We started with 60,000 settlers in the West Bank in the year 1995. By the year 2000, there was over 320,000. Right now, we're standing at 780 plus. So clearly there's something that's saying no for a 2-state solution, somehow. At least within the framework that we understood. And it doesn't mean that I'm saying no against state solution, because you can look at the European example. You have Germany and France. They had wars for tens of years, 100 years almost. Eventually now you have borders on the map, but you have the European example of cross-border life where you can live here and there, work here and there, without needing to be limited of freedom. So why not have it here? Once we were sitting with Avraham Burg and he said, yeah, we have infrastructure ready, because that's the reality. Why don't we just apply the European example? Draw the borders on the map so people with ego issues of borders get their borders, and let the people live. And that's what people want, to live, not borders. They're not going to eat borders. They're going to eat food that they live for. So, whatever solution, as long as it responds to the people needs.
So did you have any involvement with that?
No. But I know about it and about many other like them who tried. And we hope that they succeed.
Over the course of the day, we've spoken about approaches to healing trauma or exposure to healing trauma, beginning to move through it, and the need to face it and to take sort of that risk and to be guided into that. And I want to ask a little bit more about the experience of Nakba and the collective memory of displacement, exile, expulsion, which is carried very much, of course, in the present day and in the first person, that how friends and partners and colleagues of yours who are Jaffa or Haifa Palestinians who have lived in the Bethlehem area maybe since 48, how do you get them to buy into these innovative approaches if, for some refugee communities, potentially safety means return first, and then we can begin to think about how we relate to the other, but first we need to you know, my name is Ghazawi and I live in Jerusalem. First, I need to be able to go back to my home, and then I can like leave my house and shake hands with my neighbor.
Well, there is the reality that we are not right now talking about people who are living in tents, the refugee camp, for example. We're talking about third generation right now, almost, if not even fourth generation. And the reality is that we don't know if they want to go back or not. There was never a Palestinian referendum done by Palestinians, because UN resolution says clearly back, right of return, to go back and get compensated and or get compensated. So yeah, maybe some want to get compensated. When I meet with Palestinians, especially in diaspora, and we explore this idea of, you know, having that state that everyone can live in, they would say, yeah, even so, but we want to live on the Arab side. And that comes from a trauma of their pain not being recognized. So maybe a start could be to recognize, not necessarily to say, yeah, let's go back, but to recognize what happened. If we compare it to the Holocaust, 3 years after the Holocaust, you had Germany engaging in a conversation internally and externally saying we are responsible. Here, what happens so far that does not allow us even to explore in a huge level what could be the solution for the refugees is that there is no yet recognition from the Israeli side towards what happened in 1948. So it keeps it a bit sensitive to talk about it, but when you engage in deep conversations with people, you'll hear the space for we're willing to find that peace, not necessarily meaning that we have to kick an Israeli from his house, because also many do realize that now there is third generation. There are people who call it home just like us. As I, Palestinian, call this land home, there are Israelis who are born here and call it home. So nobody is expecting, although you might hear it in the news that they are expecting, or in the media because that's how they like to show it, but nobody is really expecting that all the refugees would be taken into their old homes where they used to live. So we know that's not going to happen, and there's going to be a need for a process of reconciliation on that level and a process of finding a way out for them. That's why most of the diaspora, they say if we are coming back, then we would want to be on the Palestinian side, for example. So because they have that pain. Now, as Palestinians in the West Bank, when we talk to them, special refugee camps, I used to go to refugee camps actually and say two-state solution, and you have to give up your key, basically, when I was in the One Voice movement. And now when I engage in conversations, then they see that I'm actually recognizing their pain through the conversations. They are tending to say, okay, then that means then we're going to have peace. And then that opens the space for them to explore what are the solutions for their issue. But without you recognizing their pain, they don't want to look for a solution. I'm not being recognized for what I'm suffering from. So why do I want to just go for a fix for it only?
What becomes a living memory of the Nakba in any kind of peaceful final status solution?
A memory of a Nakba. Whew. If a solution is done, whew, maybe we can rewrite it somehow. But I mean, the Nakba will always remain in the Palestinian mindset as the year where Palestinians got refugeed from their home. It's the pain, the day of pain in their life. But if we have a resolution and that responded also to their emotional need of recognition, then I see maybe at some point in 20 years, 30 years after a solution happening, maybe the Palestinians coming to see it as a point of matureness, even saying that date resulted in ending a conflict that for the thousands of years, not the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but the Jewish and other community conflict hasn't been able to resolve. The Jewish people being accepted in their homeland, where they feel that this is their homeland, and not having to be forced out. And yeah, it could be turned into a different memory. Right now it's a memory of sadness, but in the future it might be that point where a conflict started and resulted in changing history eventually, if we are successful.
So I have two different questions. The first one, and I'll keep them separate because it's more clear separately. One is, you mentioned that now the Palestinians who are living in refugee camps are either third or even fourth generation. I'm curious how trauma and the story of the Nakba and the Palestinian experience is transformed over generations, and whether, because it becomes something that's hereditary, that we inherit the traumas of our past generations. And so how is it transforming? How, and in what direction? How does it?
The first wave of refugees, or like the first refugees, let's say, they were really about like wanting to go back. Those are people who worked in their land. They have an attachment with the soil, basically. They used to plant their land. Second and third generation, you find them attached more to the identity than attached to the land itself. So they're willing to take a solution that responds and that admits of the guilt and tell the people, oh yeah, you are a victim and we're sorry for it. So that's one thing that you can see as difference between generations that are growing down.
And now, but as we get further away.
So right now it has become more of a collective community identity of refugees, of pain story that hasn't been recognized, resolved so far. So it's not more the attachment to geopolitical locations, let's say. How it's being transferred to the community generation after generation, it's oral and verbal. Transferred, it's the same way as any other community, verbal or any other way.
I mean,
yeah.
Transformed. How's it transformed?
The only thing that I see again right now is that there is different between how people used to speak about it, who were the first generations, and people of the new generation, how they speak about it. People of the old generation, they used to speak about it holding the hand, the key, like literally waiting to go back. But the new generation, they're saying, yeah, we are refugees. We are refugees. What does it mean? Pain. And it's not that they want to go back. They're not the same. There are people also, especially diaspora, Palestinian diaspora, refugees in diaspora. They are suffering bad living conditions, especially ones in Jordan and in Lebanon. In Lebanon, there are like 76 or plus, I don't know exactly, kind of jobs that Palestinians are not allowed to do, including being a doctor. You're not allowed to be a doctor as a Palestinian because you're a refugee, because they created this environment for them where it's not allowing them final settlement. So for them, that's the reality. If the whole Palestinian community comes to a reconciliation with Israel and there is compensation and there is recognition of pain, then they might choose differently, not going back. And again, it's related to they are not being the first generation who left the land itself.
Isaac.
So the landscape of trauma for the many communities here, you know, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Israeli, Palestinian, and all the sub-communities therein, is a sadly very rich landscape. Lots of different hills and valleys of trauma. And we've been spending a lot of today thinking about, you know, looking back at traumas and then how traumas, we carry them with us. We use the term baggage. We also talked about how that BDS leader from Balata and the Zionist leftist scholar couldn't see each other. Like they were sitting in front of each. I imagine them at a table and they're just looking straight through each other. I want to connect that image, that metaphor of like sight but not actual recognition, with the literally opposite ways that Palestinians and Israelis are looking at events, traumatizing events of today, of these past weeks, of each instance of escalating violence, and how in these hard days where I imagine your work seems even more necessary and more challenging, how you at the Holy Land Trust deal with that complete, you know, there's a stabbing, there's no stabbing, there's like police killing without any, like unlicensed police killing, and there's unprovoked stabbing. So how do you maybe bring those together in the here and now?
We can't deal with it. We can't change what's happening. We're trying to maintain the people who we worked with in that space where they trust what they have achieved so far, trust in the consciousness that they have arrived to, let's say. The conversations that are happening right now is how to not allow that anger and fear that grows inside us take us back to spaces where we go to the lens of the other, using the lens of the other again, okay, start the blame language. Well, in the peace camp, one of the struggles that we find is that you would have a group of Palestinians and Israelis working on a project and they would see them working together and they'd say, amazing, those are peacemakers. When something like this happens right now, what's happening, you go check each of them of their Facebook pages and you'll find them using language of attacking the other. So we're trying only to give support for not allowing that space to happen. So they keep communicating together, the groups who worked with each other. They keep processing even events together. Due to the reality that this land never stops so far having violence, we cannot guarantee. But so far, I would say that the people who get really impacted through those programs are being able to build a deeper understanding of consciousness and therefore being able so far to build resilience against this falling back. Doesn't mean that for sure they will not fall back. They can, it's easy to fall back. What's happening right now on the Palestinian side, where some of them are looking at it as frustration points, some people are looking at it and saying, oh, this is what needs to happen. People don't know what's happening exactly, and there is no leadership that's saying do this or do not this. There's nobody leading. It's obvious nobody's able to lead right now, and people are scared of the expected outcomes, closures, checkpoints. Those are expected outcomes on the Palestinian side from such rounds of violence and racial profiling. I was sharing with my friend on my way here. I'm afraid to come to Jerusalem nowadays. Not because I am afraid of Israelis. I know that Israelis are not monsters. Just that I know, and not that I'm afraid of Palestinians, because I look Arab like this. With the spirit, I look so Arab. But I'm afraid of somebody mistaking me for an assailant, or somebody thinking I'm going to be an attacker because I have a beard. Because this is what happened. Racial profiling exists also in this land. We saw 2 attacks on Jewish Mizrahis who were thought that they were Arabs. Yeah, they are Arabs, but they're Jewish. So yeah, I'm afraid of this situation also. So it's very hard to work in this situation, especially when people come to a space and work together and go back and have to face the reality what we live in right now. But it doesn't mean that you give up. So we continue to try.
Can I have a show of hands of who has questions? Just Matone. So, and Eliana, how would you feel? Because we only have like 1 minute left.
Fine.
We can take a little more than 1 minute, but if Matome, you ask your question, Eliana, you ask your question, and you leave us with some concluding thoughts.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts from your many years of experience working on both sides of these communities, the Israeli and Palestinian communities, and your experience of the previous intifadas. People claim that that what's happening right now, that the anguish and the expressions of anguish and the attacks, the uncoordinatedness of the attacks, the type of attacks, the people who are perpetrating these attacks, somehow makes what the tension that's right now unique and different, more devastating, like less death toll, but more devastating. Can you respond to that analysis of what's going on? Is it accurate? And if so, why?
Oh, do you want to ask my question?
Yes.
Okay. So, kind of want to ask you a practical question as you're here, right? I'm part of this group on Facebook called Skype with Your Enemy, and it's a group of mostly Israelis and Gazans who are Skyping together, and talking about peace. And it was really interesting because when we Skyped from here with this group in Gaza, they said, we don't want to talk to left-wing Israelis. We want to talk to the right-wingers. We want to talk to the people who have a problem with us. And I thought, okay, well, where the hell am I going to find them? But I also thought to myself, but there was also the conversation. Maybe we were just high from looking at each other because it's so hard to establish real face-to-face contact. So there was a kind of an excitement, like a honeymoon excitement type thing. But it's like, I almost felt like, how are we going to get to the conversation of asking each other, what do you need? And for it to be real. And not just, we really want peace, we'll do anything for peace, because that feels very circular and superficial. Yeah.
The analysis is right. The situation right now is more devastating than it has ever been. What I said, racial profiling, this is a new reality that's happening right now, where the attacks are happening based on your racial profiling. And there is an essence of like the white man versus the other here right now in this, which wasn't before. It is uncoordinated. It is events that are expressions of anger, frustration, despair, hopelessness. People coming to space of not seeing any good from maintaining status quo or from even staying in the same flow that we are in, which I totally agree. Not necessarily agree in the reaction, but I agree with their emotions. And yeah, if things don't change, if things don't happen really on the ground in a way that respond to people frustration, we'll see it growing more and more even. That's my fear. I don't think this is the worst. This is one of the many rounds that has showed us a more deeper level of how ugly we can get. Dehumanization is getting worse and worse actually. So yeah, I hope that responds to your question. How do you make them talk and not sound the good Israeli and the good Palestinian? It's a hard work, to be honest. We had an experience this summer also. Last summer and this summer. Last summer we had an experience in the middle of the Gaza war, and this summer we had an experience just before August and things were a bit tense. We always end up with groups that even we think that we brought the right wingers, we end up with groups who, if they see an external person or somebody looks nice in front of them, they all want to look the nice Israeli and the nice Palestinian, the ones who want peace. So how to open the conversations? It's really by bringing them to that space of them trusting each other. You need to work on trust, because to open conversations about things that are really paining us and not allowing us to take that step forward needs a lot of trust. And you need to create that space of commonality in the space that they have. Why are they in this space? What are they expecting from that space of networking that they're doing? What are they bringing with them here? And you need somehow to start guiding conversations towards matters that you find people sometimes avoiding. Bring up, we sometimes do a game, even very simple game called loaded words. When we see group of 20 people who are like, oh, you know, like the nice Palestinian, the nice Israeli, we just get out cardboards and we write 20 words that we know that are very loaded within the pretext of this conflict, and we hand them around. And they start, oh, then you start seeing faces, and then you can ask a Palestinian Israeli and talk about the card, and then you can really see the real face behind, that's hiding behind the good Palestinian and good Israeli. Yeah, so maybe that's practical for you to use.
Get that list.
Just, yeah, you know, any words. Start.
The negotiations.
Yeah. Load the 20 words. Figure out 20 words that they both get like tense to it.
Do you have 2 sentences you want to leave us with?
When are you leaving this land? Going back any? June. June-ish. And for who are not leaving, you're happy to stay here and join us also on the other side whenever you feel like. You can break the law. There is a saying in Hebrew, Al ta'avur ala khok, don't break the law. But many of my Israeli friends like to break the law when they come to Bethlehem. So you're welcome to join. And for the ones who are going back, don't become pro-Palestinian, don't become pro-Israeli. None of that is going to help us. 20 years trying to convert people to be pro-Palestinians, 12 years, sorry, not 20 years, 12 years. And as I said, I tried even to be the Palestinian Dory Gold even in this whole thing. And it didn't save anyone's life. It meant that I saw more and more bloodshed in my life. The only way for us out is really to come and hold people in this land responsible. You have a special opportunity as Jewish diaspora. You can come to a person and tell them, you know, I love you, my friend, but my friend, you're doing something wrong. And vice versa, we tell that to even pro-Palestinians. You don't need to be pro-Palestinian. You need to help me get to the place where it is actually healthy for people. So don't take sides, push them to do healthy stuff, even if they have to change their diet of thoughts.
Thank you so much, Antwan.
You're welcome.